Good afternoon. I'm Jean McCormick, and I have the honor of being the president of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute. And today I have the privilege, I was going to say, to be the first to welcome her, but you've already done that. We are delighted to have Senator Warren join us in this magnificent chamber, one that will seem very familiar to you, Senator, as a gleaming replica of the Senate chamber in Washington, where you speak so often for the national interests. We are very pleased to have you here with us for our Getting to the Point series. And for all of you as well, if this is your first visit to EMK, please come again to be able to interact with our engaging electronic exhibits and to be part of our daily chamber programs, where everyone from students to seniors to families get to negotiate and debate and ultimately vote on the issues of the day. You can be a senator for a day. I want to especially thank everyone who is involved in the planning of this. All of these events are ones that we want to be sure go as smoothly as possible, so we welcome your feedback at the end of the event as well. I have the pleasure today also to introduce Mrs. Victoria Reggie Kennedy. As all of you know, she is the co-founder in helping to shape the initial vision of the Institute alongside Senator Kennedy and Ed Schlossberg, the president of ESI Design. She is the president of our board of directors and has worked tirelessly to shape our programs, to fundraise, and to ensure that all things are running smoothly. I think it's through her sheer will and intelligence and her grace that we're able to be here today. She's an accomplished corporate lawyer in her own right, and Vicki makes sure that no stone is unturned in getting the building built, shaping the programs, and keeping us relevant to the issues of the day. And I think the key thing that Vicki has done is help us to ensure that we are honoring Senator Kennedy's legacy as a legislator. But she reminds us constantly that he wanted this to be about the 2,000 men and women who have served in the Senate, not just about him. So we work hard at that. Vicki, I think the success we've achieved is in large part a testament to your vision and your perseverance. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium our co-founder and board president, Mrs. Victoria Reggie Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean, for that very, very warm introduction. Thank you for your leadership as the president of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. You do such a remarkable job, as does all the staff here. Bill DeWalt, our executive vice president and museum director. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kelly Bovio, who is here, and all the staff who has done so much to make today happen. And good afternoon to all of you. It is my great pleasure to welcome you. It is also my great honor to welcome our distinguished speaker here today as part of our Getting to the Point lecture series. In the 6 short months since our public opening, this chamber has hosted some illustrious speakers, from the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, to civil rights legend Congressman John Lewis, to Pulitzer Prize-winning author Junot Diaz. Next month, we host Governor Charlie Baker. Today, we have a speaker who follows in that noteworthy tradition, the senior senator from Massachusetts. But in addition to being the senior senator from this great Commonwealth, our speaker today has another special connection to this room and to the Institute's namesake. In the back of this chamber, and in the real Senate in Washington, although in a slightly different spot, sits Senate Desk number 83. As is tradition, All of the senators who have ever used that desk have inscribed their names in the drawer. While every Senate desk tells a story, the names etched in Senate Desk 83 are quite special. The names include William Proxmire, John F. Kennedy, John Kerry, Paul Kirk, and Edward M. Kennedy. And the newest name, our senior senator from Massachusetts, who is speaking to us today. Now, since we're at a place that's dedicated to the history of the United States Senate, I want to share a little historical factoid with you. Since the founding of the Senate, the 2 seats from each state technically have been divided into classes, Class 1 and Class 2, to provide for staggered terms for the senators. For continuity and stability of government, our founders didn't want all the senators up for re-election at the same time the way the House of Representatives is. Obviously, the work you do in the United States Senate has nothing to do with which class you're in. You can still make a difference, but there is a direct lineage associated with each seat. Teddy's term was associated with Class 1, and if truth be told, he was very proud to be in that group. Privately, he spoke often of the legacy left by the Massachusetts senators who had served in Class 1 before him. Perhaps it was his spirit of public service, or perhaps it was also the competitive spirit of the college athlete in him, but he worked every day to honor and live up to the legacy of his Class 1 forebearers. Our speaker today is also in Class 1. Yes, as a United States Senator, she is a direct Senate descendant of Daniel Webster, Charles Sumner, Henry Cabot Lodge, John F. Kennedy, and of course, Edward M. Kennedy. Her seat had been held by giants, by men of consequence. How wonderful it is to have it held now by a woman of consequence. Think about it. How many freshman senators have such an impact on public dialogue and debate? How many freshman senators are the go-to stop for presidential hopefuls in their own party? How many freshman senators are such a force to be reckoned with? Even before coming to the United States Senate, our speaker was a fearless fighter for the middle class, making it her life's work to point out injustice and income inequality. She fought for Main Street against Wall Street and spoke truth to power, even when that power was in her own political party and in the highest offices in the land. She was a law professor for more than 30 years and wrote more than 100 articles and 10 books. At the same time, she was a teacher in the greatest and noblest sense of the word. She was no pushover, but her students loved her, with the Harvard Law School graduating classes twice awarding her for excellence in teaching. Now, that would be enough for most of us. It would be more than enough for most of us, but not for our speaker. She saw an uneven economic playing field, and she wanted to level it. So she ran for the United States Senate. And that's no walk in the park. The race was tough. It was personal. But as they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And our speaker kept going. The race wasn't about her. It was about working families who needed a champion, who needed a voice. And on November 6, 2012, nearly 50 years to the day after Ted Kennedy was first elected to the Senate, our speaker was elected to the Massachusetts Class 1 Senate seat. Once in the Senate, she fought to be on 2 committees in particular. These committee assignments don't happen by accident. It requires hard work and political skill to get on the committees you want, and our speaker is no stranger to either of those things. She fought to be on the Help Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. That was Teddy's committee, the one he chaired or on which he was the ranking minority member for so many years. This is the committee that deals with working families and their chance to grab onto the American dream. Teddy used to say that for a long time, the Help Committee was a tough sell for new members because the pocketbook, kitchen table issues that the committee deals with weren't the kind that generated headlines or big fundraising dollars. They just improved lives. But improving lives is exactly why our speaker wanted to be a United States Senator. Just yesterday, she was speaking about the burden of college loans and her plan to make college debt-free. And it's no surprise to anyone that she fought to be on the banking committee. She wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. From taking on predatory lenders to protecting consumers, I think it's fair to say that the world has heard her. My husband once said, "It is the glory and the greatness of our tradition to speak for those who have no voice, to remember those who are forgotten, to respond to the frustrations and fulfill the aspirations of all Americans seeking to a better life in a better land." Our speaker embodies the glory and greatness of that tradition, and it is my great honor to introduce her now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the senior senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was such a lovely, lovely introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you, Jean. Thank you all for being here. I am very grateful to be here at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. This place is a fitting tribute to our champion, Ted Kennedy, a man of courage, a man of compassion, and a man of commitment, who taught us what public service is all about. Not a day goes by that we don't miss his passion, his enthusiasm, and most of all, his dedication to working families. As the senior senator from Massachusetts, I have the great honor, as you pointed out, of sitting at Senator Kennedy's desk. I mean, the physical desk. That one is mine. There's a replica here, but I have the original, the kind of dented and sort of scratched up version. And exactly as Mrs. Kennedy said, it has in the drawer where Ted Kennedy, among others, carved his name in it. I sit at my desk sometimes when I'm waiting to be called on to speak or we're all in the chamber for a vote, and I sometimes run my thumb across where he has carved his name. It reminds me of the high expectations of the people of Massachusetts, and I try every single day to live up to the legacy that he left behind. Now, Senator Kennedy took office just over 50 years ago today, or 50 years ago now, in the midst of one of the great moral and political debates in American history, the debate over the Civil Rights Act. His first speech on the floor of the Senate, just 4 months after his brother's assassination, he stood up to support equal rights for all Americans. He ended that speech with a very powerful personal message about what the civil rights struggle meant to the late President Kennedy. And I want to read it for you. He said, "His heart and soul are in this bill. If his life and death had meaning, it was that we should not hate, but love one another. We should use our powers not to create conditions of oppression that lead to violence, but conditions of freedom that lead to peace. We should use our powers not to create conditions of oppression that lead to violence, but conditions of freedom that lead to peace." And that's what I'd like to talk about today. A half century ago, when Senator Kennedy spoke of the Civil Rights Act, entrenched racist power did everything it could
to sustain the oppression of African Americans, and violence was its first tool. Lynchings, terrorism, intimidation, the 16th Street Baptist Church, Medgar Evers, Emmett Till. When Alabama Governor George Wallace stood before the nation and declared in his 1963 inaugural address that he would defend segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, he made clear that the state would stand with those who used violence. But violence was not the only tool of oppression. African Americans were effectively stripped of citizenship when they were denied the right to vote. The tools varied: literacy tests, poll taxes, moral character tests, grandfather clauses, but the results were the same. They were denied basic rights of citizenship and the chance to participate in self-government. And the third tool of oppression was deliberately to deny millions of African Americans economic opportunities solely because of the color of their skin. I have spoken often about how America built a great middle class. Coming out of the Great Depression from the 1930s to the late 1970s, as GDP went up, wages went up for most Americans. But there is a dark underbelly to this story. While median family income in America was growing for both white and African American families, African American incomes were far behind those of white incomes. In the middle 1950s, the median income for African American families was just a little more than half the median income for white families. And the problem went far beyond income. Take a look at housing. For most middle-class families in America, buying a home is the #1 way to build wealth. It's a retirement plan. Pay off the house and live on Social Security. It's an investment option. Use the house as a way to be able to finance a business. It's a way to help the kids get through college. It's a safety net if someone gets really sick. And if all goes well and grandma and grandpa can hang on to the house until they die, it's a way to leave wealth to the next generation, a boost up the economic ladder. For much of the 20th century, did we lose there we go. Oh, just getting wound up here, okay. And for much of the 20th century, that is exactly how it worked for generation after generation of white Americans, but not for Black Americans. Entire legal structures were created to prevent African Americans from building economic security through home ownership, legally enforced segregation, restrictive deeds, redlining, land contracts. Coming out of the Great Depression, America built a great middle class, but systematic discrimination kept most African American families from being part of it. State-sanctioned discrimination wasn't limited to home ownership. The government enforced discrimination in public accommodations, discrimination in schools, discrimination in credit. It was a long and spiteful list. Economic justice has not ever been sufficient to ensure racial justice. Owning a home won't stop someone from burning a cross in the front lawn. Admission to school won't prevent a beating on the sidewalk outside. But when Dr. King led hundreds of thousands of people on a march to Washington, he talked about an end to violence, access to voting, and economic opportunity. As Dr. King once wrote, the inseparable twin of racial injustice is economic injustice. The tools of oppression were woven together, and the civil rights struggle was fought against that oppression wherever it was found, against violence, against the denial of voting rights, and against economic injustice. The battles were bitter, and they were sometimes deadly. Fire hoses turned on peaceful protesters, police officers setting their dogs to attack Black students. Bloody Sunday at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But the civil rights movement pushed this country in a new direction. The federal government cracked down on state-sponsored violence. Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson all called out the National Guard, and in doing so, declared that everyone had a right to equal protection under the law guaranteed by the Constitution. Congress acted to protect the rights of all citizens to vote with the Voting Rights Act. And economic opportunities opened up when Congress passed civil rights laws that protected equal access to employment, to public accommodations, and to housing. In the same way that the tools of oppression were woven together, a package of civil rights laws came together to protect Black people from violence, to ensure access to the ballot box, and to build economic opportunity. Or to say it another way, Black lives matter, Black citizens matter, and Black families matter. And here we are, 50 years later, and we have made real progress toward creating the conditions of freedom. But we have not made enough progress. 50 years later, violence against African Americans has not disappeared. Consider law enforcement. The vast majority of police officers sign up so they can protect their communities. They are part of an honorable profession that takes risks every day to keep us safe. We know that. But we also know and say the names of those whose lives have been treated with callous indifference. Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown. We have seen sickening videos of unarmed Black Americans cut down by bullets, choked to death while gasping for air, their lives ended by those who are sworn to protect them. Peaceful, unarmed protesters have been beaten. Journalists have been jailed. And in some cities, white vigilantes with weapons freely walk the streets. And it's not just law enforcement. Just look to the terrorism this summer at Emmanuel AME Church. We must be honest. 50 years after John Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out, after Ted Kennedy spoke out, violence against African Americans has not disappeared. And what about voting rights? 2 years ago, 5 conservative justices on the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, opening a floodgate of ever wider measures to suppress minority voting. Today, the specific tools of oppression have changed. Voter ID laws, racial gerrymandering, mass disenfranchisement through a criminal justice system that disproportionately incarcerates Black citizens. The tools have changed, but Black voters are still deliberately cut out of the process. Violence, voting, and what about economic injustice? Research shows that the legal changes in the civil rights era created new employment and housing opportunities. In the 1960s and 70s, African American men and women began to close the wage gap with white workers, giving millions of Black families real hope that they could build economic security. But then, Republican trickle-down economic theory arrived. Just as this country was taking the first steps toward economic justice, the Republicans pushed a theory that meant helping the richest people and the most powerful corporations get richer and more powerful. I'll do just one statistic. From 1980 to 2012, GDP continued to rise, but how much of the income growth in the United States went to the 90% of America, everybody outside the top 10%, the 90% of America, Black, Latino, white? The answer is zero. None. Nothing. 100% of all new income produced in this country from 1980 to 2012 has gone to the top 10%. Today, 90% of America sees no real wage growth. For African Americans, who were so far behind earlier in the 20th century, this means that since the 1980s, they have been hit particularly hard. In January of just this year, African American unemployment was 10.3%, more than twice the rate of white unemployment. And after beginning to make progress during the civil rights era to close the wealth gap between white families and black families, in the 1980s, the wealth gap exploded, so that from 1984 to 2009, the wealth gap between white families and black families tripled. The 2008 housing collapse destroyed trillions of dollars in family wealth across this country, but the crash hit African Americans like a punch in the gut, because middle-class black families' wealth was disproportionately tied up in home ownership and not in other forms of savings. These families were hit harder by the housing collapse, but they also got hit harder because of discriminatory practices. Yes, discriminatory practices in the 21st century. Recently, several big banks and other mortgage lenders paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in fines, admitting that they illegally steered black and Latino borrowers into more expensive mortgages than white borrowers who had the same credit. Tom Perez, who at the time was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, called it a racial surtax. And it's still happening. Earlier this month, the National Fair Housing Alliance filed a discrimination complaint against real estate agents in Mississippi after an investigation showed that those agents consistently steered white buyers away from interracial neighborhoods and black buyers away from affluent ones. Another investigation showed similar results in our nation's cities. Housing discrimination is alive and well in 2015. So there you have it. Violence, voting, economic justice. We have made important strides forward, but we are not done yet. And now it is our time to act. I speak today with full knowledge that I have not personally experienced and can never truly understand the fear, the oppression, and the pain that confronts African Americans every day. But none of us can ignore what is happening in our country, not when our black friends, family, neighbors literally fear dying in the streets. Listen to the brave, powerful voices of today's new generation of civil rights leaders, incredible voices. Listen to them say, "If I die in police custody, know that I did not commit suicide." Watch them when they march through the streets. Hands up, don't shoot. Not to incite a riot, but to fight for their lives. To fight for their lives. This is the reality that all of us must confront, as uncomfortable and as ugly as that reality may be. It comes to us, once again, to affirm that Black lives matter, that Black citizens matter, that Black families matter. Once again, the task of safeguarding our communities from violence is back to us. We have made progress, but it is a tragedy when any American cannot trust those who are sworn to protect and serve. The pervasive and persistent distrust is not based on myths. It is grounded in the reality of unjustified violence. Policing must be a community endeavor, not just in some cities, but everywhere in this country. Police forces should look like and come from the neighborhoods they serve. They should reach out to support and defend the community, working with people in neighborhoods before problems arise. All police forces, not just some, must be trained to de-escalate and to avoid the likelihood of violence. Body cameras can help us know what happened when someone is hurt. We honor the bravery and sacrifice that our law enforcement officers show every day on the job, and the noble intention of the vast majority of those who take up the job to keep us safe. But police are not occupying armies. This is America, not a war zone. And policing practices in all cities, not just some, need to reflect that reality. Violence, voting. It is time to call out the recent flurry of new state law restrictions for what they are, an all-out campaign by Republicans to take away the right to vote from poor and Black and Latino American citizens who probably won't vote for them. The push to restrict, and that's what we have to call it out for what it is. The push to restrict voting is nothing more than a naked grab to win elections that they can't win if every citizen votes. Two years ago, the Supreme Court eviscerated critical parts of the Voting Rights Act. Congress could easily fix this, and Democrats in the Senate have called for the restoration of voting rights. Now it is time for Republicans to step up and support a restoration of the Voting Rights Act, or stand before the American people and explain why they have abandoned America's most cherished liberty. You bet. And while we're at it, we need to update the rules around voting. Voting should be simple. Voter registration should be automatic. Get a driver's license, get registered automatically. Nonviolent, law-abiding citizens should not lose the right to vote because of a prior conviction. Election day should be a holiday, so no one has to choose between a paycheck and a vote. Yep. Early voting and voting by mail would give fast food workers and retail workers who don't get holidays off a chance to proudly cast their votes. The hidden discrimination that comes with purging voter rolls and short-staffing polling places must stop. The right to vote remains essential to protect all other rights, and no candidate for president or any other elected office, Republican or Democrat, should be elected if they will not pledge to support full, meaningful voting rights. It should be that easy. You bet. Violence, voting, economic justice. Our task will not be complete until we ensure that every family, regardless of race, has a fighting chance to build an economic future for themselves and their families. We need less talk and more action about reducing unemployment, about ending wage stagnation, and about closing the income gap between white and non-white workers. And one more issue that is dear to my heart. It's time to come down hard on predatory practices that allow financial institutions to systematically strip wealth out of communities of color. One of the ugly consequences of bank deregulation was there was no cop on the beat when too many financial institutions figured out that they could make great money by tricking, trapping, and defrauding targeted families. Now we have a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Yes. But it is our job to make sure that it stays strong and independent so that it can do its job and make credit markets work for Black families, for Latino families, for white families, for all families in this country. Yes. There's a lot of work to do. Back in March, I met an elderly man at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. We were having coffee and donuts in the church basement before the service started. And he came over and started visiting with me, and he told me that more than 50 years earlier, May of 1961, he had spent 11 hours in that same basement, along with hundreds of people, while a mob outside threatened to burn down the church because it was a sanctuary for civil rights workers. Dr. King, who was there, called Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, desperately asking for help. The Attorney General promised to send the Army, but the closest military base was several hours away. So the members of the church and the civil rights workers waited in this sweltering basement, crowded together, listening to the mob outside, and hoping that the U.S. Army would arrive in time. Now, after the church service, I asked Congressman John Lewis, who was here earlier, about that night. He'd been right there in that church back in 1961 while the mob had gathered outside. He'd been in the room during the calls to the Attorney General. I asked if he had been afraid that the Army wouldn't make it in time. And he said he was never, ever afraid. You come to that point when you lose all sense of fear. And then he said something I will never forget. He said his parents didn't want him to get involved in civil rights. They didn't want him to cause trouble. But he'd done it anyway. He said, sometimes it is important to cause necessary trouble. The first civil rights battles were hard fought, but they established that Black lives matter, that Black citizens matter, that Black families matter. Half a century later, we have made real progress, but we have not made enough progress. As Senator Kennedy said in his very first floor speech, this is not a political issue, it is a moral issue to be resolved through political means. So it comes to us to continue the fight, to make, as John Lewis said, the necessary trouble, until we can truly say that in America, every citizen enjoys the conditions of freedom. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a speech I really wanted to give. And I'm so glad to be able to do it right here. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
This is the right place to do
It is. I really wanted to do this. Oh, I've been working on this one a long time. Okay.
Senator's been so generous with her time. We have a few questions. It's always our process here to be interactive because the idea is that everyone has an important idea to contribute to this democratic process. We have taken your questions, and I'm going to ask the senator for you. I hope I speak your voice here. Senator Sumner from California is saying, what have you learned about the Senate that you didn't know before you entered?
Lots, but you know, the one I will seize on, because in some ways the most surprising to me is how much you can actually accomplish if you do your homework. There are more tools in the toolbox than it looks like at first. I understand that everyone thinks of how a bill becomes a law, and that's been a very tough thing for the Senate in the past few years. But, for example, Senate has oversight responsibilities. And the two committees, as Mrs. Kennedy rightly pointed out, that I fought to get on, Health, Education, Labor and Pensions, and Banking, has oversight over the Department of Labor, over the Food and Drug Administration, over the National Institutes of Health, over the banking regulators, over the Federal Reserve Bank. And there's a lot of law out there. If you can get the regulators to pick it up and use it on behalf of the American people. And that's a chance that you get in the United States Senate that I didn't know about, so.
That's good.
Yep.
It's something we do with our students where they get a chance to approve a secretary, to look at regulation. We're trying to tell them there are lots of roles in government that are important. Senator, is the democratic process fatally tainted because of the money involved? Not an easy one.
It's deeply broken. The game is rigged, and it is rigged in favor of those who have money. And when I say in favor of those who have money, understand, it's about political contributions directly that we see. It's about the PACs, so that billionaire sugar daddies can support any candidate for president and make that person a viable candidate who otherwise wouldn't be. But it's also about hiring armies of lobbyists and lawyers. Every agency in Washington, every committee hearing in Washington, every time a policy decision is on the table, is being discussed, there's an army of lobbyists there to make sure that the voices of the well-heeled have been heard loud and clear. I think of it as a place where the wind keeps blowing from the same direction. And it's not the direction of families who are just trying to build a future. It's not the direction of young people who are just trying to get an education. It's not the direction of seniors who just want to retire with a little dignity. And so taking this government back so that it represents the people is the highest goal for us now. It must be. This is what I think of as the senator's legacy. This is what I think of as my number one job in the United States Senate. We've got to take this government back for the people.
Senator Ken from Massachusetts wants to know, do you think the Glass-Steagall Act? Steagall should be reinstated?
Yes. You all know where I am on this. He knows. So let me do the quick explanation for anybody who doesn't know Glass-Steagall. So back in the 1930s, when we hit the Great Depression, A remarkable thing happened in this country, and that is that as a people, we said we don't have to live in a boom and bust economy, which is what it had always been. We said we can put some basic laws in place to level this out and make it just a little fairer place for everyone, economically speaking. And so we did three things. We made it safe to put money in banks. That's called FDIC insurance. And sure enough, you can now put money in banks, right? And we put a cop on the beat. That's the SEC, to make sure that they didn't sell fake stocks and things like that. And the third one is we separated what I like to think of as boring banking, checking accounts and savings accounts, from the high risk, high profit, high loss world of Wall Street trading. And that was Glass-Steagall. And then what happened, you can guess. The banks hated it because they wanted the profits you can make from the big trading. You get big CEO salaries and, right, return more to your shareholders. And Wall Street, the big Wall Street investment houses hated it because they wanted access to your grandma's savings account money. Because it's cheap money and it doesn't demand the same kind of rate of return. So both sides are going peck, peck, peck on that wall, wanting to beat that wall down. And what happened is up from the 1930s to about 1980, the same point about trickle-down economics that I made earlier. The wall stayed in place, it was strong, it was firm, and then starting in the 80s, there's a little hole here and a little exception there and a little piece there, until finally, by the late 90s, the whole thing just gets knocked down and repealed and it all comes together. That movie did not end well for us. Because what happened is those largest financial institutions, you keep getting more concentration of money, more concentration of power, and that's how we ended up in 2008 with Too Big to Fail and $700 billion in the TARP bailout and literally trillions of dollars in backdoor bailouts from the Fed. We put Dodd-Frank in place. It has done a lot, and it's helped. But my view is we should go back. One more piece that would be helpful is Glass-Steagall. Separate boring banking. It makes the regulation part so much easier. They want to take risks on Wall Street, then let them take risks on Wall Street with investors' money, investors who know what's going on in that case. And here's always the pitch for me. Why not? It would bring down the size of banks. It would make the financial system more secure and safer. But it would mean that the guys who want to do the high-risk trading can't get access to your savings account, and your bank won't make the kind of profits, if you're in one of the big banks, that they can make otherwise. And I think that's exactly what we should do. So yes, 21st century Glass-Steagall all the way. All the way. Good. You're going to have to go home and say, I cannot believe what a dork I'm turning into. I was just applauding Glass-Steagall, But it's important stuff. It really is.
Well, when you come here, you're supposed to learn new things.
That's right. That's right.
And when people say, why do you call this series Getting to the Point?
There you go.
There you go.
That's right.
This is our last question, because we appreciate all the time you've given us. Other than through public systems we all use, like roads and water, how do you see us being interdependent with each other?
Oh, what a nice question. So I think of this, I'll describe it this way, as the main functions of a federal government. Provide for the common defense. We all understand that. Put a cop on the beat. So we have rules of the road. You can't have everybody get into the intersection at the same time. You can have red lights and green lights. We've got to have an SEC to make sure that the paperwork you filed is true. Someone can't just come and seize your property. You got to have rules. The third part is that government gives us the chance to create investments together that none of us could create alone. So you can't build the road in front of your house, hope that your neighbors will do the same, and somehow we'll have an interstate highway system. We all pitch in so that we can help build those pieces. Why? Because we know that if we do, we'll all be better off. And I think of this in roads and bridges, but also in education. Why do we educate our children? We educate our children because they're our children, but we also educate them because a better educated America will produce more for all of us. There will be more wealth here. Do you realize that by 2020, America will have 5 million jobs that require a college diploma and nobody to fill them? I mean, just think about that, what it takes to move this country forward. And those are investments we have to make together, not loading our kids up with debt. In the last year, think where you were a year ago right now, last September. In just the last year, young people in this country have taken on an additional $100 billion in student loan debt. 70% of all kids going to college now have to borrow money in order to do that. And keep in mind, 3 out of 4 are in a public university. So for me, this is about the investments we make together. And while I'm on it, I'm going to say one more, just because I see I've got 1 more minute here. And that is the investments we make in research. This is part of what makes us an extraordinary people and an extraordinary country. Again, coming out of the Great Depression, we invested in scientific research and medical research and engineering research and social science research. Why? Because we believe that if we build a giant pipeline of ideas, our children will have opportunities that we could only dream of. And so it takes me to a point, I talk about it in economic terms. We make these investments together because ultimately it will benefit us all. We will all be better off. Our social security system will be more secure if we have a richer country. We will all be better off if we create these opportunities. But for me, it's so much more than economics. It is the moral touchstone of who we are as a people. We are a democratic people, and what that fundamentally means is we believe in opportunity. We believe that it's not just how you were born. It's did you get out there and work hard and play by the rules and make something of yourself? But that only works if there are opportunities. If you really have a chance to go to school, if you really live in an economy where they're building real jobs, if you really live in a world where there's new research and new ideas and the country's moving forward. We have to make those investments together because that will be the measure of who we are as a people. I went to a commuter college that cost $50 a semester because I grew up in an America that believed in investing in its kids. We've turned away from that. And if we don't find our way back to that moral center, we will not be a great nation, but let me say it more positively. We know what it takes to be a great nation. And that is where we will head as a people. We will take back this government. We will build a future, not just for some of our children, but for all of our children. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear.
It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, the other one. Thank you. Good to see you, dear. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Who's back here? I got my chair.
How are you? I'm so good.